Hello, sweet patrons. Welcome to your Patreon-only version of this tutorial. I'm calling this painting Soul Fire. I think you'll see why. I'll be using a set of pastels made by Jack Richeson Hand-Rolled pastels that are some of the most vibrant pinks, oranges, and reds that I've ever seen. I'll be sharing more about this set as I paint. And the surface that I'll be using is one that I love and I often forget to use it. It's called Pastel board. It's made by Ampersand. It comes in boards of different sizes and colors. This one is a 12 by 16 board. I love working on white because it's water friendly. I can tone it myself. But for this tutorial, I'm actually working on the gray board, also a 12 by 16 size. Now I'll start choosing some additional pastels other than the Jack Richesons I'll be using. And I have my reference image here. And isn't this a beautiful reference image? It's absolutely so stunning. And I'm going to share something with you that is going to surprise you, actually. So I'll be sharing more about that in a minute. Now, I wanted to show you some of my selections. These are ones I initially selected. I do add a few more. You'll notice in the top left corner, I have some darks. These are a few Terry Ludwig darks. I have a purple, kind of a blue, and a green. I have my greens, warm greens and cool greens. I have some magenta colors, purples, oranges and yellows, of course, and on my right, I have my neutrals. Here's my setup. I have the Jack Richeson set available and the pastels I've already chosen. By the way, that's just a repurposed pastel box. It was a box of Sennelier pastels that I turned into like a little tray for pastels. Now here is my painting board. I've been getting a lot of questions about this lately, so I thought I'd share it again. I have a video on how I made this board. It's a piece of gator board, and I used some chalkboard adhesive to put on the front side of it. And this is a French easel that I'm using as a tabletop easel. You can see I've just folded the legs in, and I use a big 20-pound weight in the back because sometimes I can press kind of hard. I don't want it moving around. Oh, and back behind, this is where I'm choosing the Monet Cafe starter set of J. Luda pastels. I'm still working on curating that set. Now, how am I going to adhere this board to my board? The surface I'm using to paint on is kind of heavy, so what I do is I get a paint stick, regular, one of the larger ones, and I use some artist tape to put some tape on the sides, and then I also put a tape across, you see, and that kind of supports it. So far, so good. I've used this technique quite a few times, and I just rest my board on the paint stick, and it's never fallen yet. I'm going to get in a quick sketch. I'm using a white charcoal pencil. You know, my board has a little bit of value to it, so I thought the white will show up. I don't often use pencils. Sometimes I do. A regular pencil sometimes will resist your pastels. You'll end up not able to apply over the pencil marks. So that's why I often use charcoal. What I'm doing here, now I'm speeding up the sketch. The rest of this video is only sped up slightly, but I'm just getting in the flower shapes. And I am trying to keep them gestural. I already liked where they were in the reference image. And currently you're seeing my painting in the lower right corner that I'm using as a reference image. And that is what you will see if you happen to watch the version of this I have on the Monet Cafe channel. They're only going to see my painting as a reference image. And for you guys, I'm going to share the actual reference image that I talked about earlier and tell you why there's something very interesting and special about it. And we might have some differing opinions on this, but hear me out. I think you'll become a fan, as I am. Okay, here's the image. Oh my goodness, look at this gorgeous photograph. Isn't that just glorious? Well, it is actually an image that I prompted and created with the help of AI in a program called Adobe Firefly. And I created multiple reference images from my mental conception, giving it verbal cues to create a photo of what I saw in my mind. For those of you who are curious, I'm going to hop over to Adobe Firefly right now, give you a little example. But if you don't want to watch this, you can just skip ahead to the painting part. Here I am in the actual Adobe Firefly program. You can see in the top left corner that it says beta, and not everybody can access this. I am a Adobe subscriber, and I'm not sure if I'm able to access this beta version because I've been an Adobe subscriber for so long, but I'm so thankful I am able to use this. So I've been learning this over the past, month or so, and I'm a real fan of graphics and computer technology anyway, and I thought I'd play around with this. So I'm just going to give you a quick little tour for those of you who are curious. If you're not, you can just skip through this part. But basically what you can do is you can generate images based on your prompts or your descriptions. So they just have something in here. Let me get up here. We're going to use my typewriter actually, and I'm just going to type in landscape of poppy field. How about that? And I think it's not as easy as it looks. And it's not just that the computer is generating images that are already ready to paint, because it takes a little bit of prompting to learn how to use some of these controls to get what you want. Right now, this is just a photograph of poppy fields, and that's nice, but isn't that crazy? So how does this work? AI, artificial intelligence, basically has a database of images all over the internet or all over the cyber world. And these are not images from photographers. These are creations that artificial intelligence has put together. So let me see if I can give you an idea of how I have gotten to prompt images that are so painterly and beautiful. Again, it took a little bit of playing around. I kind of like this stuff anyway. I like to keep the content on none. You can choose photo or art. Now, if I change this over here, I'm over here on the right, to art, it's going to give me things that look a little bit more like paintings. And sometimes they look a little tacky. So see, that's like, nah, I don't really care for that. So I like to keep my my images a little bit more like a photograph. I don't want it to create its own art for me to use. So I'm going to go back to choose none. Now, there are all these different prompts. I'm going to try to keep this short because I know a lot of you won't even be able to use Firefly. Again, just in case you're interested. I like to choose, sometimes I'll use a color and tone here. I'll do muted because often the color is too saturated, overly saturated. And for composition down here at the bottom, sometimes I'll do shot from below. You know how I like those images where the camera's way down low in the grass? So sometimes I'll do that. And then another one that I choose often is, let me see which one it is. Themes. Let's see. It sounds crazy, but in the theme section, I often choose this one, hyper realistic. That sounds opposite of how I work because, I like impressionism, but for some reason, this one gives me better images. Okay, so here we are still with this. My prompt down here as landscape of a poppy field. Now, I'm going to make some changes here. I'm going to write landscape of poppies cascading into a meadow with golden sunlight. And I'm going to show my trick of what I did. I had heard before that you can do this. You can tell it to create an image in the style of an artist. And it has to be an artist that has a lot of content, obviously, in the cyber world for it to draw from. And I had it created in the style, let me spell right, of Susan Jenkins of Monet Cafe. The reason I did that is because it's going to create images, I believe anyway, that it is finding images of me and my art and giving me a style that is similar to how I paint. Now, if that's not cool, I don't know what is. So I'm going to click generate on this one, and it should give me some images that are a little bit more paint worthy with a style that I like. So let's see. Oh my gosh, you see there? Look at that. Isn't that more painterly? So I think that's pretty darn fascinating. And I'm not going to make this so drawn out and everything, but I instantly can tell I like this one right here. So what I can do, I can download it, and you'll notice that the images that I share will have a little icon, Adobe Firefly, in the bottom left corner. That's because, I want people to know that, that I used this. I don't want to hide the fact. So when you download it, it will have that. Now, another thing I could do, I can click edit here and I can go to show similar. So if you like one image, you can click, they're all kind of the same, but you can click show similar and it'll generate images that are similar to this one. And oh, I like some of these with the sun shining through the poppies here. So anyway, that's pretty cool. And another thing you can do, you can choose one. Let me choose this one here. And you can say use as reference image. What it'll do now is it'll keep this one down in its little memory bank, and it uses it as a reference for future paintings. Now I can go in even further and I can change it to let's say yellow poppies or yellow daisies. Okay, and let's see what that does. Isn't this cool? I'm like, this is so cool. We are actually going to paint, okay? But I just know some of you guys, oh, aren't these pretty? Some of you guys are going to really love this. And as I said, we're going to have some differing opinions, but I think because I'm using it to generate things that are in my style already, and I'm keeping it more a photograph, I'm not painting a painting, in other words. I'm not asking it to create a painting and then me copying it. I'm basically creating my own reference content from what I see in my mind already and using a style of how I paint already. So I think that's neat. I'm going to be doing more of these, and I hope everybody's okay with that. I love it. So another thing you can do too, up here at the top, and then I'll end this so we can actually paint. Right now it's in a square format, top right side here. I can click it. I love things that are really a wide format. I can click widescreen, and it'll give me similar images in this format. And there's something else I want to show you too. Oh, look at these. Aren't they gorgeous? And like I said, they're like a photograph, so it's just fun. It's fun, and I'm going to tell you some of my reasoning for this. Sometimes I'll have an image in my mind. It's a theme we're working on, or it's something I want to paint. Well, how would I find that image? Normally, I would have to scour the internet, like using Unsplash or other sites with copyright-free reference images, and I spend sometimes hours looking for reference images. Or in a perfect world, I'd be able to fly to places. I don't have poppy fields where I live, for example, and I don't have the budget or the lifestyle to go to some of these places. So this is a beautiful way for artists like me to create what you visually see in your mind already. All right, that might have been a little long, but I knew some of you guys would be interested. And as I said before, the Monet Cafe version doesn't get any of this content. So this is special, cutting edge art technology for my patrons. All right, now we're going to paint. Here is the actual reference image that I created with Firefly that I will keep up for you guys to reference. I'll also have it attached in the Patreon post for you to access. This first pastel I'm using is a Terry Ludwig, a dark kind of magenta color, not a bright magenta, but just a nice kind of muted, darker magenta. And notice the flowers in the reference image. Some of the flowers are pretty dark, specifically the ones the top left. That's because the sun is behind them, or behind, in front of us, behind the flowers, if you want to think of it that way. And it's coming towards the flowers. So there's going to be a shadow side on the back of these flowers. And the shadows are darker with the flowers that are further away from the sun. There are some directly in the path of that source of light that are going to be a little lighter, specifically two little flowers kind of popping up, the ones to the right of where I just put that down. So I'm just getting in this magenta color as just a blocking in. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm focusing on blocking things in, not getting too fussy about anything. And for those of you who are beginners, you probably struggle with this like I did. I often had a hard time with things just looking messy for a while. But just keep in mind, that's how it's supposed to work, especially if you're painting with an impressionistic style. Now, I got in a little bit of a blue in the top left corner there. If you notice in the reference image, it's a little darker in relation to the sky in the upper left corner, and kind of this smoky blue. And I'm getting in the general general colors and values right now, and I know that I can tweak them with layering later. I'm going to neutralize some of these colors a bit with more layers that I add. So again, this is still just the blocking in stage. My goal is to get the majority of this surface blocked in and not really any of the gray space showing. And I actually do a little bit of blending, you'll see me do later, to kind of soften everything before I start adding second layers. Let me let you know about this. This is a Sennelier pastel that's a dark blue, like a pretty dark neutral blue. And sometimes pastels can have a little ridges on them when you first use them. And I had to kind of scrub it down a little bit on a piece of paper, actually, just to get a smooth application. So sometimes you have to do that. So I'm in the blocking in stage right now. Right there, I was pointing out this ampersand pastel board. Please keep it safe if you purchase it. Don't lay it down like I did with lots of other things on top of it. It can scratch. Now, I was able to rectify some of those little areas that were scratched like that. I kind of rubbed it in with my finger, but by the time I'm done with the painting, it's not even obvious. So I'm using the same dark blue now to get in some of the shadowy areas. There's some pretty dark areas in some of these flowers that are especially more away from the sun. It's not quite as dark in some of the flowers that are kind of those middle flowers there that are reaching towards the sun. But again, this is the blocking in stage. Embrace the fact that it's going to look a little yucky before it starts to come together. That's one thing that I didn't know when I first started painting. I would paint each section trying to make it look like the photo already looked. And if you paint that way, you're going to lose that feeling of impressionism. So remember, painting is a process. We're layering in the undermost parts of the painting or the image first. There's another line right there that I'm trying to rub in. And then it's gradually growing like a field of flowers from the underneath up. And now I'm just using this pretty golden color. You know that sun is casting a golden glow. So underneath some of the grasses, there's a golden influence. Now, when things get closer to a source of light, what do? What would you do if you walked close to the sun? You'd warm up. Well, colors warm up too. So that's why some of the areas near the sun, I'm giving it a little bit more of a pinkish tone. This right now, I'm using it because it's the correct value. I know it's going to be a little lighter near the sun. Later, I come back and add the pretty yellowy, bright colors. So again, it's the blocking in stage. If every color is not perfect, it's okay, but make sure you get the value right. That's the lightness or the darkness. And so you will start to see my sky. Again, this is just blocked in. You will see it gradually come to life and become more of what you see in the reference image as I layer pastels. Now, the grasses started to cool off a little bit the further away they got from the sun, and also this side of the grasses is a little more in shadow, so that's why I changed to a little bit more of that cool green. And I use this analogy a lot. Painting is often, it's like a dance. It's like you're just working around, moving around, trying to get values and motions and colors, kind of just in general all over, and then we gradually continue to develop it. You can really see a real line going across the painting there, kind of where those middle flowers are. Now, this sunlight was casting this twinkle of gold or orangey color in the distance near those trees where the sun was kind of peeking through that break in the trees. And, you know, one thing I find about, so let me finish. So I'm using this orange to get in where the sunlight may be influencing some of the grasses. Now I switched to a little bit more of a golden, a little lighter. Why would I be using lighter here? Well, I'm getting in that area where the sun is casting its light through that break in the trees. But what I was going to say is I found that the AI images really accurately portrayed how light and value and color behaves in life. And real quickly, back to the subject of creating your own reference images with AI. It's not as easy as you may think. I mean, some people might think, oh, that's not fair. You just say, do this image and it does it, you kind of, it doesn't give you what you want right away. You've got to know how to prompt it. And also, like I said, because I put in the style of Susan Jenkins of Monet Cafe, I think it influenced what it chose because, like I said, I have enough content on the internet as data throughout the web of information that I think perhaps it did give me images that were more my style. And that's an advantage of having a lot of content out there. But you could type in the style of Monet or Van Gogh, and it's going to give an image like that. Now, I don't consider this plagiarism, like I'm painting from someone else's painting, because this is what I am orchestrating from my mind, and I am tweaking the images. I had to do quite a few prompts to get the image that I was seeing in my mind. So just keep that in mind, guys. I know we're going to get some differences of opinion with this, but I think it's fun and incredibly creative, and what a tool. I have a few more that I'm going to do from images that I verbally prompted. All right, you can see I added more dark down in the foreground. From the reference image, you can obviously see there's a dark area to the lower left. I loved how it balanced out. There's a darker trees to the upper right, and there's darker element to the lower left, and the composition was just nice. And I actually prompted it to have some flowers peeking up over the horizon line, which is a style that I love. So again, I gave it a lot of hues. Now I've added some warmth to the grasses. I've got things getting pretty much blocked in now. You see almost everything is covered, but I know that sunlight's coming right through that little break, and I'm avoiding little areas here where I'm going to add the lightest flowers. There's two little flowers that are quite a bit lighter, and I'm just leaving it blank because I want to be able to really get that light pink in there. So now's where I was saying before, I got the value in. It was kind of a light, really light gray blue, and I didn't care that it wasn't yellow because I wanted to do a little bit of layering with color. So now I'm starting to give that golden glow on top of that grayish blue that I added before, and now I'm just getting the value. I know it's super light, but I'm resisting the urge to press hard. Keep such a light touch that you almost drop your pastel. I actually drop my pastels a lot because it's taken me years, but I have a lighter touch now. I gave a few little gestural marks to give that feeling of, how the sunlight creates rays. I didn't want to overdo that. I feel sometimes when you create those rays and it's super linear or obvious or hard, it almost looks tacky. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe that's not everybody. So I like to make it very subtle. Now I'm getting some warmer greens in, that pretty little warm green in that middle area, and now a few more darker greens down where it's getting really dark in the roots of the grasses there. And it's so loose. Can you see how loose this is? And now you can see I've added some of these beautiful goldens to the area where the sun is coming through. And now I'm going to get in a little bit more dark. These flowers reaching up over the horizon line, these two flowers, they're going to be darker than the other flowers. You can see it in the reference image that they are a bit more in shadow. They're further away from the source of light, and so are these that are buried a little bit more down deep in the grasses. And this is still a bit of the blocking in stage, but I really am pretty much done with blocking in the majority of the surface. And again, if you lean towards an impressionistic style of art, I know many of my patrons do because that's probably why you became patrons of mine, because I love that style. I highly advise to do this loose block in stage first. And now I'm really getting to this a little bit of the second stage. I'm layering over some of the things I've already put down. And why would I be using this magenta to layer over that darker blue? Well, that's because the sun is warm and it's still a dark tree, but they are warmer, so I use that pretty magenta. And I'm using this blue for trees that are further away from the source of light, so they're going to cool off a little bit. And you can really see those subtle influences from the AI reference images. Again, it does a great job at emulating reality. It's really kind of weird if you ask me, but it's cool. This is the area of focal point, one of the main focal points. Of course, some of the flowers, definitely the flowers reaching up above the horizon and those middle bigger flowers, but most certainly that source of light. Now, it was a little bit chunky, so I'm using just a paper towel to blend with. I'm going to speed this up. I am turning the paper towel. When I go to a new area of color, I turn it to a cleaner area. And I don't always blend like this, but because this board had some slight scratches, the blending did seem to help. And now I've got things pretty much blended in, and I'm going to move on to getting in some of the color for these flowers. And remember that set I showed you, the absolutely gorgeous Jack Richeson. These are the hand-rolled pastels. He has other pastels that are a little harder, but I love these hand-rolled pastels. The size is perfect. The color is so gorgeous and vibrant, and the application, wow, it's just like butter. Now, I don't love labels on pastels. I just don't like having to take them off, but it is convenient. You could see that color number, and I'm going to hold up most of them that I work with as I get the flowers layered in. I don't hold up every single one that I use, but I will have a link in this post, Patreon post, where you can purchase these. I got mine from Dick Blick. This is a little bit lighter in value, and unfortunately, this does not happen for long, this out of focus section. When I held up my pastel to focus on the pastel, the autofocus just locked in on that, and it didn't refocus. So I'm speeding up through the portion that's out of focus, but here we go. Now we're back. And all I did was add some of this lighter. It's just a tad lighter than the first darker magenta I got down. And I'm just loosely painting in the general shapes of the flowers. I'm not really thinking about every petal at this point. Those get developed later when I come back in with some of my lighter, more vibrant pinks that I add where the sun is catching onto some of the flower petals. And notice I'm using it on its side. I've learned over the years to kind of maneuver the pastel, sometimes to lift up and use more of the point if I need more of a linear stroke. And if I need something smaller, obviously I wouldn't lay the whole pastel down if I was doing a small flower. So I just kind of lift up on the back side of it to kind of change my application. Now this is a little bit lighter. This one is lighter than the first two that I used. And I'm using it to get that light value that I'm seeing in the flower. Again, just shapes. I kind of zone out to the fact that I'm even painting flowers, and I just focus on the shape, the value, and the color. And it sounds weird to say, kind of turn your brain off and don't think about every single detail of the flower. Now, this is a gorgeous purple. I think this may be... Oh, that might be a Jack Richeson that's just a lot smaller now. Why would I be using this purple? Well, I was seeing that little influence of a magenta purple on the back side of some of these flowers. Not all of them. I heard artist Marla Baguetta say, if it's everywhere, it's nowhere. And I don't know if she invented it. You know, we say these things from other people so much, we don't know who originally started it. But it's so accurate. If you put this purple everywhere on every flower, nothing has that impact anymore. And it's not everywhere in the photo. There's just some that have a little bit more of that purpley shadow on the back side. Now this is actually a blue that I'm using. It's not the same purple. Why would I have switched to more of a blue? Well, there's some of the little areas of shadow. There's another one, R17, whatever the other number is underneath. There's some of the areas of shadow that were a little cooler. The first purple I put down was warmer, and areas where it probably was more in the light, and the blue was cooler where it's further away from the sun. So as you can see, I'm just using this pastel now to just sprinkle in some of the light areas of these flowers. Oh, by the way, I think this is another great thing about AI. I think when I did the prompt for this one, if you don't give it prompts, it comes up with things that are weird. I mean, it can look very strange. I have to maneuver it a little bit verbally to get what I'm seeing and what I want. And when I first put it in, I think it made them they weren't even poppies. They were some kind of a weird flower. And I thought, I want them to be a little bigger. What kind of flower could I tell it? Well, I told it to use azaleas. Now, I know azaleas don't grow in fields like this. They grow in bushes, but that was the flower shape that I wanted. So can you see what I'm saying about how we are painting with our words, or we are conceptualizing with our words? And, we get reference images currently from nature. You go out and find an image or something. But I got to tell you, so often I have a concept in my mind of something I want to paint, and I've got to search through lots of reference images to find it, and then it's not even what I saw in my mind, or to search throughout the world, which I don't get to do, to go find what I see in my mind. So I'm not trying to sell you. If you're not a fan of the AI thing, I'm not trying to sell you on it. I'm just trying to give you information that you might not have thought about before. So I get to literally create what I see in my mind. And I think it's just fascinating. And to me, it's part of the artistic process. I am visually able to create something from what I have seen in reality already. Now, there's another color. This one is even lighter. Where would I use this one? I'm going to use this one where that sunlight is hitting. Now, mostly it's hitting on the flowers a little bit more centrally located, and just on the tips of some maybe that are a little further away. And again, I'm just giving gesture, little gestural shapes. Now I'm adding there's light catching on some of the little rims of the flowers, just the little edges, and there's light filtering through them. So I'm giving just a little hint of some of those little shapes. And I'm going to switch to an even lighter pastel. This is a gorgeous fluorescent pink. I was like, the pinks in this set are some of the most vibrant pinks I've ever seen. And that's why I kind of wanted to create my own image with AI to get what I was seeing. Now, this is a lighter pink. And like I said, these two little flowers that are reaching up, this is this is even a more fluorescent pink. Look at that. But the composition, it's a focal point element called convergence, where you have things pointing in the direction you want the viewer to go. So I think this reference image was awesome for what I was trying to portray mentally, what I saw. And I'm going to share something with you also that many of you may know, some of you may know, I wrote a children's book. It's called The Mountain Queen. It's a Christian message. It's an allegory of sorts. And I had to create all of the paintings from my mind. We'll pause that thought. I'm going to talk about this red right now. Why would I be using red in this painting? Aren't these flowers pink? Well, guess what? There was some areas that the sunlight was getting through to some of these darker sides of the flowers, and it was casting this reddish glow, specifically in some of those up top, just where that sun was peeking through some of the areas that were maybe a little darker values. And I'm working with the purple more now. Okay, back to my Mountain Queen. So I started the Mountain Queen concept book before I got cancer. I got cervical cancer. I went through chemo and radiation, and I had to put that project on hold. And when I finally, praise the Lord, became healed, and thank you, Jesus, and also had more energy. It was a long healing process. I started my Mountain Queen project again. Now, have any of you ever tried to create something that wasn't there, a painting where you have an image of a person and they're in this field or they're doing, it's hard. And I have a graphic design major, so I know Photoshop. I literally got images that I saw and compiled them together to the concept that I saw in my mind for the pages of the book. And it's hard because when you grab, mine has a young girl. I want her in a field at a base of a mountain. I want her looking up. I want morning glories all around. And it's hard to find all of those images. And when you do, you put them together in Photoshop. Not every image you found is cohesive with the other image. The values aren't right. The girl will be too dark. The scene will be too light. So you have to really paint from logically what the scene would be rather than sometimes what you see. I hope I'm not giving you guys TMI, too much information. Oh, by the way, I'm just darkening up the bases of some of these flowers. So I had to create the book that way, and it was hard. And I've often wanted to go back and repaint it and have a new edition. Okay, so guess what I did? I used AI to conceptualize my book from the pages I had already made. And if you guys want to see it, well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some of the pages at the end of this video. How about that? All right, so let me get back to this. These are some, you see I added in the darks, but some of the little areas, what is that called? The part that holds the flower? It's not the stem, just the little base part that holds the flower is a little greener in some areas. Now this is a pastel that I'm just finally starting to get in some of the stems. They're a little bit bendy, and I want to use pressure that is like a press and release type of stroke. And I'm just getting in, a few of them, but they're going to get covered up even more. It looks kind of weird right now because I don't even have any of the grasses developed in that middle ground area. But this was just to give some support to some of these flowers. It was they were looking like they were floating away. And also something about stems. If you're painting flower stems, you may have done this before. You may get a little bit of a darker colored pastel, and you go to create the stem, and then all of a sudden it disappears in an area of darker value. For example, these are showing up great because they're on top of a lighter area. Oh, and I wanted these to be so delicate because the sun is almost washing out the stems. I didn't want a dark, thick stem by any means. But sometimes my point is that you may have to use a lighter color. There's another pink I'm using for a stem when it gets down into grasses that are darker. So you might have to work with your values a little bit there. Here you could just see how I use this lighter pink to get in those two flowers that I mentioned were going to be lighter. Why? Because they're right in the direct path of the sunlight. I got in a little bit, the first one I had just before that one, I shook my finger because that was the wrong color. I got in a little bit of a magenta color, and now I'm getting in, it's kind of a greenish mustardy yellow color, and it's a darker value though than the golden colors where the sunlight is. Why would it be darker as it's going out? Again, it's away from the sun. Now I'm using a little bit of a magenta color. Again, further away from the sun. It's not quite as golden. It's a little more pink. And pink is cooler than yellow. You can see on the color wheel, it goes away from yellow, so it's obviously going to be a little bit cooler. And now I'm going to be working more on filling in some of this grassy area in the foreground and the middle ground. You can see it's still pretty much just still that blocked in area that I blended in. And I am just looking at some of the shapes, values, and gesture in the reference photo, not using it as a hard and fast rule that I have to create everything just like it. I just like to kind of play and have fun and make my pastels move in the general way of some things, knowing I have some layering capability later to come in and add some more of those flowers. I saw some really pretty purplish flowers in the foreground you'll see me add later. So I'm still just, playing, giving these little azalea, whatever shaped flowers, some little personality, a little bit more of development as to where the light is catching on some of the petals. And this is when it starts to get fun for me. I've got pretty much everything is definitely blocked in. And there's another kind of a darker reddish pastel, reddish pink, and I'm just getting in some shapes. There's little flowers in the distance. They weren't necessarily like, how the AI developed it, like they were more of the azalea flowers. It was almost like they were a different little small variety of pink flowers. So, and by the way, the AI sometimes, before I got it honed in and gave it, some more direction, it'll put weird things. It put flowers in the sky, like way up all throughout, like the flowers were clouds, some strange things. Now I've switched to my right hand just because it was more convenient. And often, you guys know if you've been patrons of mine a while, we've had some exercises where we use our non-dominant hand, and many of you just loved it because you learned that sometimes you can make more gestural marks when you use your hand you're not typically painting with. So I find that's very a very convenient thing when you're wanting to get some gesture in life. And you should try it if you haven't tried it already. Lefties have a little bit of an advantage because we live in a right-handed world, and often we have to learn to do more things with our right hand than most people do. There are some little darker elements deep in the grasses. So I'm using this dark blue. I don't think it's the same Sennelier blue I used before. Maybe it is. Yeah, I think it is. Just a deeper blue to give a little bit more depth to this. Your painting will feel flat if you don't have enough darker values. That doesn't mean you have to have it everywhere. I have a tendency sometimes to go too dark, so I don't want to, give somebody a bad habit. And now it's time to lighten up these trees a bit and work a little bit more on that light source coming from behind the trees. Some of it is kind of filtering around the trees so that some of them, especially in the middle, are catching more of that golden glow. And I'm working it logically down through the grasses where that sunlight will be hitting, and it will stay its lightest, of course, right there in that little valley between the trees. You can see it very clearly in the reference image where the shape of it, you can see this light area that's a shape. And if you can learn to paint like with shapes in mind, it's really going to help you a lot. And now enjoy some music while I continue to develop this painting. And I will be back. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of my final stages of this painting, and also a little bit more about this concept of AI, something I think is really neat. Okay, guys, enjoy to music. I'll be back soon. I wanted to pop in here and let you know this is where I am adding the lightest obvious value in the scene. You can even see it in the reference image. There is such brilliant light shining through these trees. And this is not a white that I'm using. It's a very light pale yellow. Now, to make this make sense, which actually follows the reference image, things need to be very light coming out from the sun ray or sunlight area and gradually go from light to darker as it radiates. So I had to get a little bit more of, you see the lighter green grasses I added. Now I'm developing a little bit more of the light that's hitting on some of these flowers that is catching that light shining through. Even though they're far away, there's a few of the petals that are capturing some of the light. You'll see me lighten things up as I go. And also, you're gonna see me, I'm gonna add some more music. It's like 42 minutes. I've been talking for a little while. I'm gonna take a little break. But you'll see me, like here, I liked some of the little hints of purple, bluish flowers in the deeper grasses. But you'll see me even lighten things up more towards the development at the end of this, where I add my final lighter highlights. Even on some of these purple flowers, light is still catching there, and also on some of these pink flowers that I'm adding into the distance. Some of them did have a light influence. And you guys, feel free to use this reference image. I don't have any problem with it myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with working this way. And also, it's kind of addicting. I've already created so many reference images. I would like to create a Google album with my AI images that I've created, Again, I feel like I've created them because I give so much information for them to create the actual reference image. And I want to make it to where you guys can feel free to use some of the images that I have verbally created. Oh, here's some lighter purples I was talking about. On another note, talking about verbally creating. Many of you know my heart for the Lord and my Christianity that I share. I try not to beat you guys over the head with it like a Bible. Come on, you got to believe. But I can't help when it comes out sometimes. But I know a lot of you are of the similar orientation. And I'll just say, for those of you who are, do you remember how the Lord in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, how he created the universe, our earth? How did he do that? Well, he spoke it into existence. It was the word that he used to create all things. So not that I'm saying this whole AI thing. I trust me, I have my problems with AI as well. It could get very nefarious in some dark places it could go. But for purposes that are tools, I think it's fine to use. But keep your judgment up about when it gets weird, Just be careful, and we pray on that. But I think it is interesting that my images that I'm creating are verbal. They're by the word. And again, I'm not painting from a painting. I'm painting from a photograph that I prompted and even suggested and orchestrated it to be in my style of painting. And so anyway, now I'm getting to the lighter highlights. I'm getting to that the light side of these Jack Richeson pastels, and I got to say they behave so wonderfully on this surface, the ampersand pastel board. As you can see, you can get quite a few layers with it. Here's some of my little more lighter purple, like a purplish blue color. I love that color. And this is the point of a painting. I really love the stage where it's kind of like I'm just playing. I'm getting in my spice and some light highlights on some of the grasses and leaf shapes. And I do still have to develop that area of the field, that golden. If you look for the part that's golden in the field, it's still very flat right now. So I add a little bit more to that so that it doesn't feel segmented, different from the rest of the painting. Here I go now. I'm adding some lighter greens. It would make sense that that sunlight is getting some lighter greens in that area. And like I said before, I don't focus on painting grasses. I'm just painting little shapes and just kind of zoning out and looking at my reference image and seeing bigger shapes versus smaller shapes. If I was to try to create every blade, every flower, every petal in the perfect spot, this painting would lose that painterly and impressionistic style. I'm finishing up here, and just so you know, you guys got all the goodies with this. The Monet Cafe version is not going to have all of this commentary, definitely not all the information about how I got the reference image. And your videos on Patreon are always commercial free. You can relax and enjoy. And I truly cannot wait to see what some of you guys do with this. I'm looking forward to that. And also I'm looking forward to some of your comments. I hope you guys embrace what I'm doing here with creating my own reference images this way. So it's going to be lively. It's going to be fun. All right, here's the final image. I loved creating this painting. I hope you will too. As always, God bless and happy painting, beautiful patrons.